So we're further exploring the production process of the consumer, and that we are a limit situation. So we cannot produce ourselves any more than the consumers that we're given as. And this unique situation means to say that we can read, say, price for our labour in a completely different way. We touched upon supply and demand in a prior episode. So now we can look at the way how price is used as a signal for producers. So if price is, if there's more demand, then obviously the people bid up the price for a particular good, and so that acts as a signal to producers to produce more, in turn to sate the demand, and so therefore the price will equalise over time, like to a clearing kind of mechanism. So, but how does that relate? That supply and demand relates to the the consumer that we're given as. So, we think of the consumer as somehow separate to the people that we are. That we are not credit instruments, that we maybe don't even produce ourselves as such, or maybe we understand ourselves as consumers, but we've never really thought this through. So the price on our labour as a signal, so the information that it has within there, just like any other producer, there is a signal that relates to us. So I want to explore what that means, because you cannot produce yourself any more than the limit that you're given as, all right? A form of life, when there's a totalising claim made on time, so time is the means of our production. What does price mean in this context when there's no other time than the time given to us? We cannot add more on to produce more. So therefore, what does price entail when we're looking at it from our labour? And so if we're looking at it from our labour, we're looking at it from the marginality of time, or the way how we get sold on life, the way how it's given, to not question these things. And so price of our labour is the way that we'll explore the reinforcing frame of the way how that we're orientated towards life, that externalizes questioning or thinking what we're actually doing. And the way how that we don't understand, this is a good way to frame that if our roles are, if existential arbitrage is where we simultaneously buy and sell the self, that is this reoccurring thing that occurs constantly that we're not aware of. We don't understand that whenever we buy, we've been sold prior. So our being sold prior is what leads, because then that justifies the way how that we can rationalise the price of our labour in reference to the life that we're shopping for, literally. Then the price of our labour is in reference to the vehicle, not our lives become, but the vehicle of this form of life becomes, in order to orientate ourselves to what we hold out for life. So the usual way of understanding, say, the price of labour is obviously in reference to the value of what you can do, or the speciality or proficiency, your proficiency in something. And so therefore, obviously it's in reference to the market for whatever it is that you're proficient in, your speciality. And so therefore that creates the kind of the baseline for remuneration. And so therefore, in that way, you have, obviously it's in reference to a labour market, but what's incumbent upon the person in that context, if you're looking at outside the labour market and you're solely looking at the price of your labour, well, the price of your labour is not really in reference to what you, as much as it's in reference to what you do, but what you do is always subordinate to the consumer that you are. So you're sold on the value of what you do in reference to the remuneration, but the remuneration is in reference to the buyer's journey that's been set for it. And so therefore what it does is it legitimizes you as a demand center or as a credit instrument. And so ultimately what price in this context, the price of your labor validates, is a transcendental claim that's made over the totality of your life when you are given as such. And yet people are sold on it otherwise because they discount the production process of the consumer for them to find meaning in what they do, or to validate the role, the position that they have, the status of what they do, maybe in reference to their peers or in reference to the social proof of their mobility or their intramundane, say, transcendence. And so price here is a way of reinforcing what we don't question when we're given as consumers and when there's a totalising claim that's made on time. Because in order for you to be orientated towards the price of your labour, you're looking at life marginally. And so as a result of looking at it marginally, you're not looking at the totality of your being in reference to the claim that's made on your entire existence. Okay, so that's the way how you get sold not to see. So you only see life, your life as a life, but not realizing that your life is placed in a vehicle, that the consumer vehicle, in order for you to orientate it towards it, and that vehicle that you presuppose is being claimed through you becoming an actuary of the very mechanism that means to say that you don't have to question what you outsource when you're orientated towards the value proposition of the time and the way how that you can price your labour. So this is key when you're looking at, well, if we're sold not to see, what ultimately are we sold on? All right, so we might say that we're sold on life, all right, but we're just sold on not actually addressing what we externalize when we're sold on life. And so the way that price, the way how that we rationalize price, or the way how we are sold on the marginality of our time, perpetuates a system of capture that has nothing to do with who owns the means of production, but it relates to the means of your production. Because if time's given as an economic good, it's given as a means to produce a form of life that's transcendent to the way how that you sell yourself on life any other way. And so therefore the question of who owns the means of production, if you're looking at it from a Marxist critique, is completely irrelevant, because Marx looks at it from a false dichotomy of labour and the capitalists, rather than looking at the marginality of time and the way how that when time's presupposed to be of value, that's a truth claim that immanentizes essentially a belief or a religiosity that is completely and utterly disregarded. And so, and that is maybe more evocative of a materialist kind of, the materialist dialectic, as it were, rather than look at that your life is a spiritual. And how can we say that? Well, compensation is a spiritual, say, principle. You know, you seek a return for your actions. You have to be compensated for something that you do to justify where you are. So what you do is that in that context, you discount something of the self that you do not know, because how would you know that if through the process of discounting you're credited a limitation of agency, and ultimately, which is demand, you're a credit instrument. And so therefore the way how that you get sold on the value proposition of your time, on the totalising claim made on time, on the fact that it is a command economy, or that your time is valuable but is obviously an economic good, then how can you own your time as much as what you think if through the use of the credit you are not the originator of, you introduce an animating principle to your life, to your actions that you do not originate. So if the credit that you use is originated somewhere else, and other people have control of that, they're animating you for an end that you'll get sold on, but there's an end that's always transcendent to it, and you can't see that makes for a totalising claim or existential totalitarianism. And so therefore that your movement in social mobility is predicated upon ultimately a suspended animation, or not potentialising any change in the way how things are given, because you're sold not to see that totalising claim, even knowing that you see the symptoms of our way of life all around. You don't know that the ultimate cause is a cause removed. And so therefore you can trace it from a genealogy, and this is what people do. They trace it to the genealogy of the origination of the credit, and so therefore you go down You're looking at, say, central banks and fractional reserve currency and whatnot, and then obviously the development of crypto or Bitcoin. But then that still leaves the question of credit. You're a credit instrument, so you're credit a limitation of agency that predicates a buyer's journey, but then you don't understand that the principal truth claim is that time is a value, that you've spiritualized time, and through spiritualizing time, you've immanentized a religiosity or a belief in something that it's not, that you become the actuary of, and so therefore you practice a bad faith. Now, if you only get beholden to money, and so the origination of money, and don't connect it to that spiritualization of time, you're not actually you're not chasing the genealogy of the issue of the cause to that spiritual truth claim. And so therefore what happens is that nobody questions the return on their actions, that whether or not that, I should not be compensated. It's presupposed, it's a fait accompli. Independence is sold as an ideal, ultimately because you're trying to be independent of a claim that's made on you by securing your financial independence that necessitates the whole apparatus of the managerial paradigm to manage assets on your behalf, so therefore you can have annuities into the future. How is that transcending anything? How can you remove yourself from that if you don't look at that one question on whether or not you have whether or not you have a choice on the way how time's given to you? Because if you don't, obviously it's a command economy and you are commanded to produce yourself as a credit instrument you are. But if you get beholden to money, you don't understand that the truth claim that has been immanentized is a religiosity, is a belief, and so therefore a bad faith that everybody lives their lives by. And so therefore you can look at who owns the means of production of your time as an economic good as principle for what would be the potential for change. Because do you have a choice on the way how it's given or not? Is there an opportunity cost to your actions? This is the one thing. If people never ask the question about how they produce themselves as a consumer, how are you ever going to fucking know that there's an opportunity cost to your actions, which there is? This is what we're exploring. Cheers.